the brother of Jesus who started history's deadliest civil war. In 1837, a young Chinese man named Xiuquan collapsed during his third failed attempt at the Imperial Civil Service exam. As he lay delirious with fever, his mind shattered by disappointment and shame. He experienced visions so vivid they would change the course of human history. In his delirium, he saw himself ascending to heaven, where he met an elderly man with a golden beard who called him son. Standing beside this figure was another man, younger, with wounds on his hands and feet. And this wounded man embraced Hong as his beloved younger brother. When Hong awoke from his fever, he was no longer a failed scholar. He was Jesus Christ's younger brother, sent to earth to establish the heavenly kingdom. What followed would become the deadliest civil war in human history, claiming more lives than World War I. Xiuquan's transformation from desperate academic failure to messianic revolutionary didn't happen overnight. Born into a Hakka farming family in Guangdong province, Hong had spent years preparing for the imperial examinations, the only path to prestige and power in Qing dynasty China. These brutal tests, based on ancient Confucian texts, had a failure rate of over 99%. For Hong, each failure wasn't just an academic setback. It was a crushing blow to his family's dreams of escaping poverty. But in 1843, 6 years after his fever dreams, Hong encountered a Christian missionary tract that would unlock the meaning of his visions. The pamphlet spoke of a heavenly Father and his Son Jesus Christ, and suddenly Hong's delusions crystallized into divine purpose. He wasn't just anyone's younger brother, he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, chosen to purify China of demons and establish God's kingdom on earth. Hong's first converts were his own family members, then his students, then entire villages swept up in his charismatic preaching. His message resonated powerfully with China's oppressed masses. The corrupt Qing dynasty were not legitimate rulers, but demons who had usurped the mandate of heaven. The Manchu emperors who had conquered China 2 centuries earlier were portrayed as devils who must be cast out to make way for God's true kingdom. Hong proclaimed himself the heavenly king, established strict moral codes forbidding opium, alcohol, and prostitution, and perhaps most radically, declared that men and women were equal in the eyes of God. By 1850, his followers numbered in the tens of thousands, and they called themselves the Taiping, the followers of the Great Peace. The Qing government initially dismissed Hong's movement as another peasant rebellion, the kind that flared up periodically throughout Chinese history. But they gravely underestimated the explosive power of Hong's religious message. Combined with widespread social discontent, when imperial forces attacked the Taiping stronghold at Ginshan village in 1851, they expected to crush a ragtag band of religious fanatics. Instead, they encountered a disciplined army of true believers who fought with suicidal bravery, convinced they were doing God's work. The battle was a catastrophic defeat for the imperial forces, and Xiuquan declared the establishment of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, with himself as its divine ruler. What happened next defied all expectations. The Taiping army, swollen with new recruits fleeing poverty and Qing oppression, began a military campaign that would shake the foundations of Chinese civilization. They swept through southern China like a holy hurricane, capturing city after city with shocking speed. Traditional Chinese society crumbled before their advance as they implemented radical reforms. They redistributed land, banned foot binding, promoted women to positions of authority, and established communal living arrangements. By 1853, they had captured Nanjing, the former imperial capital, and declared it the capital of their heavenly kingdom. The Qing dynasty, which had ruled China for over 200 years, suddenly found itself fighting for its very survival against a messianic madman who believed he was the Son of God. But Hong's divine mission was about to collide with the brutal realities of governing a vast territory during wartime. The Taiping leadership, drunk on religious fervor and military success, began to fracture under the pressures of power. Hong became increasingly paranoid and reclusive, convinced that demons were infiltrating his inner circle. His most capable general, Yang Shuking, declared that he too received direct revelations from God the Father. Setting up a power struggle between the supposed brothers of Jesus, the utopian vision of the heavenly kingdom began to crumble, as the Taiping leaders turned on each other in bloody purges. While outside the walls of Nanjing, the Qing forces regrouped for a final devastating assault. The real nightmare of the Taiping rebellion wasn't just the massive fighting, it was what happened to Xiuquan himself. As the war dragged on year after year, the man who had proclaimed himself the Prince of Peace became increasingly unhinged. Trapped in his palace in Nanjing, he issued increasingly bizarre edicts. He declared that his followers must refer to him only as the true Lord. He claimed that his bodily waste was sacred, and he demanded that his subjects worship him as a living god. The religious reformer, who had once preached equality and justice, became a megalomaniacal tyrant who executed thousands of his own followers for the slightest perceived disloyalty. By 1864, as Qing forces surrounded Nanjing for the final siege, Hong had descended into complete madness. He refused to allow his starving followers to surrender, insisting that God would deliver them through divine intervention. Instead of accepting defeat, he chose to consume poison, dying in his palace while his followers were slaughtered in the streets outside. When the smoke finally cleared in 1864, the numbers were almost incomprehensible. The Taiping Rebellion had killed an estimated 20 million people, more than the entire population of many countries. Entire provinces had been depopulated. Cities lay in ruins, and the Chinese economy was devastated. The Qing dynasty survived, but it was mortally wounded, never again wielding the absolute power it had possessed before Hong's rebellion. The rebellion had exposed the fundamental weakness of imperial China and set in motion the forces that would eventually lead to the dynasty's collapse in 1912. What had begun as one man's fever dream had become the deadliest civil war in human history, proving that religious fanaticism, when combined with social desperation and political instability, could unleash forces capable of destroying civilizations. Xiuquan's legacy lived on long after his death in ways he never could have imagined. His ideas about equality, land redistribution, and resistance to foreign domination would later influence Chinese revolutionaries, including Mao Zedong, who saw the Taiping Rebellion as a precursor to his own communist revolution. The rebellion also marked the beginning of Western involvement in Chinese internal affairs, as European powers provided weapons and advisors to help the Qing government suppress the uprising. Today, Xiuquan is remembered as both a visionary reformer and a cautionary tale about the dangers of religious extremism. His story raises uncomfortable questions about the thin line between inspired leadership and dangerous delusion, and how the deepest human desires for meaning and justice can be twisted into instruments of unimaginable destruction. In the end, the man who believed he was Jesus' brother became something far more terrifying, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people in history are those who are absolutely convinced they are doing God's work.